Hello, this is the NICU Lived Network, and we are your hosts. I'm Melinda.
I'm Nat.
And I'm Emma. We are all NICU mothers using our lived experience to partner with health professionals to impact research, advocacy, and clinical practice.
Each week we will bring you something new. It could be a topic highlight, the latest in research, a visit to a NICU, or ways in which you can use your lived experience within the NICU to impact change. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the NICU Lived Network. We are with Nat. Hi, Nat.
Hello.
How are you? That's good. Well, unfortunately, at the last minute, Emma wasn't able to join us. She was called away to another meeting that she couldn't get out of, but she's going to be disappointed because the topic today is one of her very, very big passions. So that's unfortunate. But we are joined today by Dr. Rachel Collum, and some of you may know from not too long ago, we spoke to Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
So welcome glad to
back.
have you back.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back.
It's great to have you. So Dr. Rachel Collum is a lecturer in psychology in Newcastle in the UK. She's also a fellow mum of a 29-weeker. Who's now 5 years old, and I guess it puts her in a really prime position to understand from both sides, but her interest is really in FI care, which is family integrated care, and also what that means beyond the NICU and how, I guess, being born early affects adults born prem on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much for joining us.
Very welcome. I will talk about it all day, every day. So yeah, happy to be here.
So do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came into the project? And then the topic that we're talking about today is one of your projects called PERIScope, and tell us more about that as well.
Yeah, so until my little boy was born preterm, I had nothing to do with this sector at all. Like you said, I was a lecturer in psychology. I don't think I knew what a neonate even was, like it just wasn't on my radar. And then a couple of years after we had that experience, I started thinking, well, this is something I'm really passionate about. I'd like to actually do my research and all my work in this area. So I kind of started drifting towards it. And in the meantime, I was doing quite a lot of parent advocacy work with our local charity in the Northeast, which is Tiny Lives, and really thinking about how we could support parents on the neonatal unit a bit better. But then I saw Lisa Spring give a talk at a webinar. Lisa's part of our group, and if you follow neonatal people on Twitter, you might have come across her. And she was talking about some of the issues she faced as an adult, and she never really connected the dots back to her prematurity until very, very recently. And it got me thinking, actually, there's a whole load of research happening on the neonatal unit, and we know absolutely loads about how important it is to have skin-to-skin care and to support families. But then there's kind of a cliff that it drops off around age 5 or 6 when children start school, and they're just assumed to have caught up and all the services drop away. And hearing Lisa talk made me think, yeah, that's not really the reality. So we got in touch with her, and then this project has evolved from that, really working with adults born preterm to examine a bit more what issues they face that might be because of that start that they had in life, and how we can just raise awareness of it, really.
When you say that drop off in terms of at 5 years old, is that something you notice yourself with your own experience?
Yeah, and I think it varies. So because our little boy didn't have any complexities or problems, we didn't have any services around us. So I think it might be a little bit different if you have got a child who maybe was born extremely preterm and is still seeing like a neurologist or a speech and language therapist. But there's a big proportion of parents out there who are in our kind of demographic. So your baby's born early, but they're never actually sick. We always say Arthur just had to grow, which is what he had to do. But it means you get discharged in the UK at least from follow-up at 2, and then you don't have any kind of support around you after that. So unless there's a new issue that comes up, you don't really have the support, but actually that early experience obviously still stays with you. And we do see with our little one, like he's got some attention issues and some self-regulation issues, but not really enough to meet a diagnostic criteria or to get support services in place. And I think that's coming out from the adults we've spoke to. A lot of them, it's a similar thing. They've never been diagnosed with anything. What they're dealing with has never been severe enough to have a massive impact, but it is significant enough to affect them on a daily basis. So it's that kind of grey area, I guess.
I know you talking about that kind of, I'm thinking of my son, Dylan. So he was born at 27 weeks and the same, he, with his lungs, thankfully, he didn't cross over to chronic lung disease. He didn't have asthma. He was kind of cleared of all that, but we were still having issues with him. And even to the point where if he would be around friends or he'd be jumping on a trampoline and he wouldn't be able to catch his own breath, he would get off and I would see him, coughing and then he'd vomit and it would relax it. Then he'd get and he just got to this point where he would just self-regulate, And in class, I'd have to say, please let him always have, water handy on his desk. I know, they can get in trouble for that, but he needs to do that. But we never got a diagnosis, and a doctor would just say, look, he was born so early, these are just prem lungs. He goes, there's nothing to call it, but that's what it is. But the same, around two and then 4 we had another checkup, and then that was it. We had to deal with it ourselves. So it's really interesting what you're saying.
Yeah. Lauren, you've had experience with that, haven't you, as well, that you were talking about the other day with the kind of eternal cold that doctors like to class you with.
So because I've got vocal cord paralysis from being on the ventilator, but any time I go and see a GP, the first thing they say is, oh, if you've got a cold, you've obviously got a very sore throat, there's nothing we can do. I said, well, I haven't got a sore throat. I always sound like this. And if you looked at my notes and someone recorded it properly, you might be aware of that.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So tell us about PERIScope.
So, like I said, the project kind of was sparked by Lisa and me listening to her talk about some of the challenges she faced. And then we had a chat and just a whole load of stuff unfurled that, like, she was talking about different issues she has and the fact that she constantly felt she was being dismissed when she tried to go to professionals, and either they would just be like, oh, well, you were born early, a bit like you just said with your son, oh, prem lungs, that's the end of it. Or they wouldn't even look back that far, that it would be because of something else. So I started to think, like, is this just Lisa or is this something across the board? I suspected the latter, and of course it was. So we got in touch with Sophie Proud as well, who's amazing. So she's a neonatal nurse and she was born at, I think, 23 plus something. I'm not exactly sure what, but she was extremely preterm. And she actually ended up working as a neonatal nurse in the same hospital she was born alongside people who were her consultants. So it's like a lovely, lovely full circle story. And she's amazing. She's a massive proponent of family integrated care. She really, really gets it because I think she has a beautiful relationship with her family, and I think she's talked to them a lot about what it was like being her parent on the NICU, and then she kind of translates that into her work to make sure she supports parents. So she's fab. So she got involved, and then we just kind of had an open call on social media to any adults born preterm who were interested in talking about identity, which is how the project originally started, because we were sort of interested in like how much does prematurity shape, I guess, adults' experiences, and this idea that you're a miracle and you're a survivor, and if you've kind of grown up with that language, what does that look like? But actually, from talking to the adults in the initial interviews we did, we found that didn't come out necessarily as a thing. The strong theme that came out was this idea of awareness amongst professionals, and often feeling dismissed or feeling that prematurity probably was having a really important impact on their day-to-day, but it wasn't being connected to issues that people were facing. So the project's evolved a little bit now to be more about that and how actually we can work with professionals to raise awareness of some of those issues. And I think the beauty of the project is because it's been a co-production project. So everyone apart from myself and one academic researcher at another university in the Northeast is an adult born preterm. And I I had these ideas about identity, and we were going to do all these creative exhibitions and stuff, but actually the group were telling me that's lovely, but what we want is something that's got application, where we can actually do some sort of training with professionals, or, you know, some education session. So it's evolved based on the needs of the group, which is exactly what I wanted. Like, I'm a parent of someone born preterm, but I'm not preterm, and that's two very different things. So that's been really important, I think, to capture.
That's amazing that you've had, like, the adults are telling you that, you know, these are, you know, that really strong theme that's coming out, but the adults telling you is that, you know, about, you know, the doctor's responses, you know, not connecting the dots with their preemie history. Like, it's
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for adults, when they engage with the health professionals, are they kind of, is their preemie story kind of front and center, or is it something that they only kind of think of afterwards?
Lauren, you can probably answer that better than me.
It's very, very varied. So it depends. Some of our parents have been quite upfront and honest with us from quite early, just saying that, you know, you are a little bit different to your friends at school. You were born early, you might be a bit smaller. And other parents, just for whatever reason, haven't really engaged so much with their child about their prematurity. And it's something that they've come across later in life, possibly through health conditions or other areas that they've struggled with.
Yeah, there was one person we interviewed in the early stages who had said it was only in the last year that their parents had told them that they were born premature, and they were kind of in their 30s. So they had never actually known. And they said it had been like a massive revelation, because suddenly all these things they'd been struggling with, they had a reason for. So, yeah, I think that can be really powerful. And I guess similarly, professionals often just don't look back that far. I know Lauren's a massive campaigner of having the question from professionals, were you born preterm? Which is such a simple thing, doesn't cost anything to implement, but could completely open up and turn around those conversations and really pinpoint what's going on, rather than kind of clutching at straws. So yeah, I think we'll
even
keep
if they do ask that question, they then need to know what to do with it. So
exactly. I always use the example of kidney development. So I've got chronic kidney disease, but I'm quite lucky that mine's quite low grade at the moment. Seems to be influenced by stress and being tired. But it was only then that I learned that you're born with a set number of nephrons which help your kidneys filter. So if you're born at full term, you have lots of nephrons, and that helps you filter all your waste. But the earlier you're born, the less number of nephrons you have, and that then places a little bit of strain on your kidneys for what you're doing. So as you grow up and take ibuprofen, or you're 18, you start having a few drinks, that can actually have a slightly bigger impact on you compared to your friends. And that's something you really need to be aware of from an early stage, so you can make proactive life choices about what you want to do.
And I remember at the same time, and I think I mentioned the last time we spoke, was that, you know, I had very much, when the boys had gotten to kind of school age, had kind of thought, you know, when we see the GP, I don't really need to mention that they were prem anymore, because that's not relevant anymore. But I mean, the thing, you know, it was what Mel kind of might have made me think about it, but then also talking with you guys is that actually I think I'm always going to have to mention that, you know, whenever we see the GP, whether we think it's connected or not, you know, I just say, you know, they were born prem.
I think it's just putting that seed into parents' heads, that, like, you don't have to ask it every time, but just have it kind of somewhere there in the back of your mind. Maybe this is connected. But you're right. I think there's a bigger story around broader education for professionals here as well, because actually, unless you probably work in the neonatal follow-up sector, you might not actually know about these links between, like, the early kind of neurological developments and anything in later life. But if we can encourage professionals to ask the question, hopefully that will also help them identify a gap in their knowledge where they have it. And I think that's the kind of bit we're hoping further down the line this project can fill. So our kind of grand plan, if we can get funding, is to do more kind of explicit training and awareness. And we work with so many fantastic professionals. So we've got a fantastic bank of knowledge already. So, you know, we've got people who could talk about kind of neuroprotection and the benefits of skin to skin and what the effect this has across the life trajectory. So it's just putting it all together, I guess, to get that message out to professionals. But yeah, that's a little way off yet. That's the kind of grand goal.
And I think so far from the research I've read that a lot of these things are actually, you can monitor within primary care through blood tests and the usual routine things. So I just wonder if people think, oh my God, to monitor these people, we have to scan every 6 months and it's very expensive. Actually, we can get across that most of the time, no, it's not. It will be routine things, but it just means you can pick up things early to prevent things progressing later on.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like when you're pregnancy, you know, you're kind of monitored a little bit different, and you know, there's a little bit more attention on you. I know from having the first one prem and then the second one, you know, even earlier, that the third one, I was always being watched or spoken about or that. It's almost like a high risk life, isn't it? That you just have a little bit more attention or a little bit more thought as you keep continuing and then you develop.
Yeah, I know we've compared it quite often in our discussions in the group to autism, and how there's been a real push in recent years in the UK to include autistic people in like any research and kind of support needs and talk to them about what they need. But, you know, it is a diagnosis, and those people have that almost as an identity, which a lot of the time comes out from conversations they do find helpful, because then it is like a flag for professionals. Oh, this person might have difficulties or strengths with X, Y, and Z. And obviously prematurity isn't like classified in that way. You know, it's not in any diagnostic manuals, or it's not in a category. Like in the UK, we have like health and education support plans for children that have any additional needs, and prematurity isn't listed as part of those support plans. But actually there's a lot of research coming out suggesting that children might really struggle at school for a whole host of reasons because of prematurity exclusively. So I think, yeah, again, there's a bigger conversation to be had about how we start to actually consider like the longer term impacts of prematurity, and if it would be helpful to have that kind of classification.
Well, considering that worldwide, it's 1 in 10 babies are born.
Exactly, it's not small.
In a class of 30 or however many a teacher might have, you know, the chances are that there's 3 that have been born early. So even within the education system, like our teachers and carers need to be aware of, you know, some of the challenges that children are going to have as a result of their prematurity.
Exactly. There's one project that's going on in the UK. It's called the Prem Aware Award. It's by a charity called The Smallest Things. And they're doing exactly that. They're working with schools, and they've got a whole load of free resources for teachers to just give them a little bit of training around like what things to look out for if a child was born preterm, what they might need support with. And I'm hoping that's going to kind of snowball, and actually the government might pick it up and take it forward, because at the minute, like I said, it's completely charity led, and it's just what schools have got the time to take part will. But yeah, that needs to be like, I think, across the whole system and universal, so that everyone's on the same page.
One of the things you also, just from this chat that I'm thinking about is, so when I again had Dylan, like, so Dylan's 19 now, but after that experience when he was 1, and we again were discharged, you know, we're out of the hospital, but realizing that it doesn't end when you get discharged. Your life kind of begins once, you know, you come out. But one of the things that I really wanted was to be connected to other parents who had also gone through something similar. I'm Italian background, huge family around me, first person to have a prem. So nobody understood what that meant, what that looked like. So I really wanted to be around that, and that got developed into peer-to-peer support. But from our conversations and the ones that we've had in the past, Lauren, and this one, I'm also thinking that NICU parents also need to have contact with adults who are born prem. Like the insight that we are getting as parents is nothing we could have gotten from other parents, if that makes sense. Like the emotional support, and there was definitely the tips, and you know, like it was amazing to have that way forward. But I think there's so much to learn, yeah, from adults that are born prem, and better ways to connect parents with adults born prem. Yeah, I think it's incredible.
I was thinking exactly that the other day, because I'd seen something on social media about like a call for veteran parents, and that exact thought did occur to me. Why does it need to be the parents? Why can it not be adults or even young people born preterm? And so that was kind of the first iteration of this project when we were looking at exploring identity, was we were going to put on some sort of creative exhibition. So we'd done a bit of pilot work with kind of 10 and 11-year-olds with like collage making and art and sculpting and stuff to get them to show what prematurity looked like for them. And I think we've parked that idea for now, because like I say, there's more explicit and concrete things we want to look at first. But I think we will definitely come back to that, because I think something like that could be really helpful for current NICU parents to kind of see what young people or adults who were born preterm think of their lives. And what came out from that pilot work was loads of positives, which is obviously really lovely for parents who are currently struggling with the NICU to see. And because you always hear about deficits and problems and difficulties and failure to do this, and, you know, doesn't score up as high on that. That's pretty bleak for anybody to listen to. Actually, what about all the positive stuff? And that's really struck me from this group that we've been working with. Like, everyone's just phenomenal. And like, I kind of want to almost showcase that a little bit. Like, you might have had a really, really, really challenging start to life, but like, it doesn't need to be a barrier. You're not always going to be behind or smaller or less than. And actually, these are all the strengths. So I think, yeah, that again is quite in the distant future, but we'd love to do like some sort of creative exhibition like that, where we really just show off all the wonderful things about these people.
But even to your point where you said about the mum that hadn't mentioned to their child, you know, in their 30s that they were born early. So just being able to have that awareness to say, oh, this is something I should make them aware of as they move through life, as they, you know, visit doctors and things like that, that if they do have some things that come up for them, that it may be connected.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Rachel, I was just curious, you mentioned that, you know, you're getting in touch with various adult prems. How are you kind of getting and making contact with people? Like,
pretty much social media. So we've got a Padlet board, which we can share the link after this if that's helpful. And then, I'm encouraging people to follow me on Twitter and like just drop into my inbox if they want to get involved, really. It's all virtual at the minute, obviously, so at least there's no geographical boundaries. Like, our group are from all over the UK, and we've got one person from Canada on our group, and we have had a couple of people in the US recently say they'd like to be involved. So I think there's demand there clearly globally. So because it's all been virtual so far, there's not really any reason why we can't sort of branch out. So yeah, I'd just encourage people to drop me or Lauren a message, and we can take it from there.
So what's the requirement for them to be involved?
Just have to have been born preterm, so less than 37 weeks. And obviously happy to share a little bit about themselves through the discussions. Of course, if it comes to it and there's like anything too personal, nobody ever has to talk about anything they don't want to. So we kind of have our core co-production team in place. So there's 8 adults born preterm, and Lauren's one of those, and Lisa and Sophie, who I've mentioned. And they've been conducting interviews with other adults born preterm. So at the minute, we probably don't need more people on the co-production group, because that's a really like strong group and we've kind of built rapport with each other. But if people want to be interviewed or want to input into some of these creative things we've spoken about, or just want to hear more about it, then yeah, just need to be over 18 and born preterm, essentially. That's very simple criteria.
And then once that's all, so if somebody is watching and they do connect with you, so what would be expected of them? It would be to have an interview with someone from the core group.
Yeah, potentially. So at the minute, we're kind of between pots of funding. So we're about to apply for some more funding. So things have slowed down a little bit for now. We've just finished phase 2, which was interviewing some adults born preterm. And we as a group are going to analyse those and pull out some key themes, which is kind of, we've got a hunch, some of the stuff we've been talking about today. And then based on that, the plan is the next phase will be where we start putting together some kind of training or recommendations for professionals. Mm-hmm. So we'll probably want to interview a wider range of people born preterm, hopefully from different like ethnicities and demographics and potentially different either parts of the UK or even parts of the world, to inform that education. And then we'd want probably more input from those people as well about if we're on the right track, because I think that's always really important. And even though everyone on our core group is obviously born preterm, we're really aware of how individual different people's perspectives are. So actually the more perspectives we have, the more we can hopefully capture what's important to a wider range of people. So yeah, it'd be interviews or focus groups, and then probably giving some feedback on the direction that the project's going in.
And what's your time frame for it?
That's $1 million question. That might depend on the pots of money. I think I'd say over the next 2 years, we kind of want to get at least a draft of these recommendations in place. Okay. And then obviously the speed of implementing something like that in the UK is not fast. So yeah, after that, it probably would be quite a mission to actually get these things implemented. So that will be a work in progress. The creative exhibition, I think we'd like to do in the next couple of years alongside. So even if kind of all the training and stuff isn't complete by that point, I think that's something we can kind of do anytime to just raise awareness and get people talking about it. So yeah, hopefully the kind of groundwork will be done over the next couple of years. And then I think we're talking probably 5 to 10 years realistically before anything gets implemented. And yeah, that seems very far away at the moment, but we're determined. So
yeah,
we give up.
And I'm just wondering, when you do kind of put together that set of recommendations, and you mentioned, the time frames that you think it might be implemented, how would you go about implementing it? Would it be like presenting to various health professionals, or within that NICU follow-up space that you mentioned before, or through forums such as this?
I think it's going to need to be probably 2 or 3 pronged. So we've talked about this in the group, which was when we were talking about the creative stuff. And I think it was you, Lauren, wasn't it? It was like, that's really lovely, but like, that's not going to hold much weight with people in the medical profession who are used to significance values in data and reports. So I think we'll need to use more that approach to convince maybe the kind of professional community about why this is important and why it matters. Very well evidenced kind of academic style. But then the awareness raising, like with parents, for example, I think we will take like a completely different approach. So it will be things like this podcast, hopefully like the creative exhibition that we want to put on, probably more like newsletters and things that we could potentially, send out to schools or where we know that there might be parents of people born preterm. Obviously, Lauren's got brilliant group of people around her with the Adult Preemie Advocacy Network. So we've been really working with them to think about what they're already doing, because this wasn't my idea. Lauren's been working on this stuff through the APAN for I don't know how long. So
nearly 3 years now. Yeah,
exactly. So it's about making sure we supplement the work that they've already worked really, really hard to do. But that obviously then is brilliant, because we know there's a whole network of people there who would be interested and willing to talk about it and things. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be one approach really. I think it will need to be multiple approaches. But yeah,
like we were saying earlier, it's a small world, and the truth is we all need to work together, because combined there are a lot of us, and we can apply sensitive pressure that things do need to change.
Yeah, exactly. And having people like Sophie as well, who's obviously working on a neonatal unit, is fantastic. And obviously you have to be careful with, you know, conflicts of interest and getting that balance right. But it means she's got that insight from a staff or professional perspective as well. So I think it's just making sure you capture all the different perspectives and understand, like, what I say as a parent of a preemie might not sit well all of the time actually with a neonatal nurse, for example, and working out where those kind of touch points are and how we can work together, like Lauren says. So yeah, it's big. It's a big challenge.
But a worth
I know.
Yes,
Yeah.
very well.
Exciting, and I think there'll always be, you know, there'll be a huge response.
That's what I was just thinking. And it doesn't, like, it's parents, it's the parents themselves. Like you said, it's the medical system, but then it's the educators. But, you know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it's also a village to be able to support them when they're adults.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Like, I just, I don't know if I can speak for you, Nat, but every single time I just feel like I just keep learning so much more every time we speak on the subject. And I hadn't even thought about, like, the extension of, you know, taking it beyond what it is for just parents, but also how much it means to be able to connect them with the adults that have been in the situation. Like, it's just, incredible.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Probably been the biggest surprise for me since, you know, becoming involved in the network is that, you know, there's this kind of, you know, emerging, growing voice from the adult prems, and it's like, this is amazing. It's amazing. Every time I, you know, do these talks, I just kind of like madly writing down notes. So thank you.
Yeah. And we all need to keep advocating that it goes beyond the NICU, like it's beyond the neonatologists, it's beyond the pediatricians. It then needs to become part of, anytime you see a GP, anytime you know you see a new doctor, a new specialist, or admitted into hospital, it needs to be part of the conversation, and then they need to be educated in terms of what do they need to do and what do they need to look for.
And in schools as well.
Yeah, everywhere basically. Because like you say, it's not
take on the world.
Yeah, it's not a rare thing. So yeah, any professional is going to have come across at least a handful of people born preterm of whatever age. So yeah, it's something I think that just needs to be in the minds of more professionals.
Yeah, I know when we were even when I first started in this space and you know, working towards helping families, and those numbers, you know, 1 in 10, or in Australia it's 48,000 babies are sick, and just being able to, you know, I'd do so many talks where I'd say you're going to have one, you know, one, or you are one. Like, those numbers are huge. So there needs to be, these conversations need to keep happening outside of just that small, you know, cocoon of the NICU, and look at what happens once they get discharged and they start growing, particularly as more and more earlier babies are surviving. It needs to be so much more of a focus.
But just at the beginning of the talk, you mentioned that, you know, there's a lot of research and a lot of focus on kind of, you know, NICU or the early years. But do you get a sense now that there is growing attention or a growing body of research around kind of preemie adults, or do you think that's still
a tiny bit, would you say, Lauren?
I would, and the beauty of Rachel's project is that it's moving away from this tick box exercise, like, do you have X? Yes, no. And actually talk to us, because we might say yes for a certain tick box, but unless you understand the reasons why and talk to us, we're never going to move forward. And that's the absolute beauty of Rachel's project, is that we're all actually having conversations and we're learning so much from each other.
Yeah, there's a bit of a thing in psychology about, like, there's still a bit of a reluctance to do qualitative research because psychology has fought so hard to prove, in quotation marks, itself as a science. People want data and numbers and significance values, and qualitative is still people treat it a little bit nervously, but I'm not really, I don't really buy into that. Like, I don't think it's possible. I just don't think it's possible to understand the issues that adults born preterm are facing with any of those standardized measures, because of exactly what Lauren said. If someone says yes or no, so what does that look like? And you're only going to explore what that looks like by talking to people. And I think because medical advances have improved so much over the last 30 or 40 years, there is now a group of adults born preterm who didn't really exist before, because the prognosis was so poor for babies born early, back 50, 60 years ago. They just weren't surviving. So actually we've got a whole group of people here that nobody has really spoken to or worked with about those issues before. It's the same thing happened with Down syndrome when heart operations improved, and suddenly you had an adult population of people with Downs, and no one really knew what that looked like in adulthood. I think it's fairly similar kind of concept to that. So I think, again, it's really simple. Talk to them. Like, ask, what does your daily life look like? What are you proud of? What's going really well for you? What might you find difficult, and what support might you want? Those are really simple questions, but can open up all the important stuff.
What's been the response so far within the medical community about what you're doing?
Well, we've kind of not strayed too far into it yet, because we wanted to do the groundwork. So obviously people have seen things we've put on social media, and I think the response to that has been positive, and generally, this is needed. I think that's probably what most people are saying. We've not tried actually going into the medical community yet and telling them they need to change, which is always the difficult part. So come back to me in 2 or 3 years with that question. But I think the feeling is there is a gap here that is needed. And I guess the intricacies of how we navigate it is yet to be confirmed.
I think we're all on the same page with that, because I know from some of the talks I've done, I get emails saying, oh, that was really interesting and I've learned a lot, and keep doing what you're doing. And that's lovely, really encouraging. But what we now need to do is all sit around the table and say, okay, how do we take this forward in a productive way?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a scary thing to do.
Yeah.
I know everyone's a bit reluctant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even the statement you guys made about, the quality of research and stories, I was like, absolutely. It's 100% agree. You'll never understand fully.
No.
It's through the power of stories that, it's always it's a human thing. It's always going to resonate with people.
I don't comprehend how you can. It just blows my mind that you can do anything where you want to understand people without that element, because that's the way you understand people, right? By talking to them. Just seems like a bit of a no-brainer. But like I said, we're still not quite there with the psychology community. We're definitely getting there, but it still is a little bit like, you've kind of just made it up. Almost you've just looked at these interviews and decided what you want them to say. Whereas, if you do a statistical test, you've got an answer. But we're getting there. But I'm not going to be giving out standardized assessments for this project, let's just say.
That was amazing. Thank you. I'm just blown away by how much I learned in this space. It's the most unexpected thing. It's just amazing.
It's been great for me as well, because obviously everything I was preoccupied, for want of a better word, with was from my perspective as a parent. And I think because my little boy is little, he's 5 going on 6, I never really thought about what he was going to look like when he was older. I guess what kind of sparked the very, very, very early stages of this project was I was really aware. I talked to him a lot about him being born preterm. And we've got a lovely little book that was written by an American author. It's 6 pages, but it's about being in the NICU and having to grow, and a magic bed keeping you warm and this kind of stuff. And I talked to him a lot, and then I was thinking, am I talking to him too much? Am I pushing that identity onto him? Is he okay with it? And it and then that got me thinking, what actually, as he grows up, is he always going to be smaller than other people, and is that going to be a big thing for him? Or, you know, is he going to be proud of the fact he was preterm and he fought really hard? And but then actually talking to adults, you realize you may be worrying about things that don't worry them so much. It is a lot of the time more of this practical day-to-day stuff that actually matters. So that's then helped me think, what might I want to put in place now to support Arthur in case he has difficulties with X, Y, and Z, and even stuff to look out for. Like, quite a lot of people of the group have talked about, you know, various medical issues that they think because it's never really been checked by a professional, but they think are because of their prematurity. So it just puts that in my mind. Or, you know, if Arthur has an ongoing cough, or if he has, I don't know, kidney problems, for example, I'll be a bit more aware as a parent. And I think that's a really important thing we want to get across for other parents from this project as well, because obviously I'm privileged that I've been working with all these people, but your average NICU parent doesn't. Exactly what you said, Melinda, there's that gap, and actually it would be really helpful to be connected with adults born preterm. So yeah, it's been great for me, like I say, to kind of switch up my perspective a little bit and then think about how that can help me with Arthur as well.
Yeah, it's been a huge huge eye-opening exercise for me and all this. Like, Lauren, that last talk we did, I was just like floored just by like everything you said. I was just like, yes. And it was actually really, sometimes I even just as a parent think, is it just us a lot of the time? You know, and just, you know, just the things that you had heard in the group, and it was just kind of like, I'm already kind of overhearing, you know, some of that kind of chatter in the school playground with the kids, you know, like my son gets teased a lot for being so small, and just, I was just like, oh wow, you know, it's just.
I have so much respect for you guys as parents, because I know, talking to my mum, she was basically made to feel like she was an over anxious, hypochondriac, mentally ill mother, because she had concerns about my development and what I was going to look like. And the GP just kept saying to her, you know, oh, overprotective mother, baby's out of NICU, you know, she's fine. And I don't know how you guys do it without that acknowledgement of what you have been through, and also what your baby and child is dealing with. I just, you know, it's not just about us, it's about our parents.
There's another project I've been, well, it kind of stagnated when I went on maternity leave, but that I'd started. So we looking at those kinds of things. So looking at parenting a preemie, but in the demographic, a little bit selfishly, that I'm in. So this demographic of babies that actually are healthy and get discharged at 2, and what that looks like. So all these kind of softer or grey area issues that don't meet thresholds and don't get services. We've just ran one focus group. I think there were 4 or 5 parents on it. I haven't analysed it yet or really looked back at it. But just from memory, a lot of the things came out really strongly were things like the importance of being connected with other parents, and like how powerful and supported that can be. And also the kind of conflict between exactly that, Lauren, like, oh, you're an overprotective mother, what are you worrying about? Like, your baby's not preterm anymore, they're worrying. And actually, parents who go the other extreme, which was me and maybe a couple of the other parents, where you don't worry about anything because everything was worse on the NICU. So like, you take your baby for their first jab and you don't even blink because you've seen them be cannulated 8 times. Whereas like your other parents of full-term babies, it's like a traumatic experience to go for the first jabs. And then you feel guilty for not being upset. Other parents are being upset. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to explore with that project as well, and that's been fascinating. But I think these 2 projects are really complementary, and actually, when I've actually done that other project, I really want to share the findings between both projects, because I think they sit beautifully, and because that demographic is parents of, I think, it's been so long since I looked at it, but I think we'd said parents of children under 15 for that project. So actually, these are exactly the parents who probably would find it really helpful to talk to adults born preterm. So yeah, grand plan, but I would love to like sync those 2 projects together. I think that'd be really helpful.
We'd love to have you back again to talk about, you know, the merging of those 2. And yet the exhibition side of it excites me. I like to, please, I hope that goes ahead. There's always been moments in my life where I'm just like, oh, I'd really like to, through the lens of that NICU lens, kind of like, oh, I'd really like to paint that. And it's really nice when other people have that urge as well. Like, just like there's this,
Yeah, there was an online exhibition I went to sometime earlier this year or the back end of last year that was like it was like poetry and art of like what it's like to be a parent on the NICU, and it was just beautiful, like so powerful, like far more powerful than any journal article is going to capture, or even like interview. Like obviously talking to people is really important, but I think it's so much punchier to like see a picture or read a poem. Or I think it's a really, really powerful method. Lauren is right. It's not a method that sits well in the medical community. And I can't imagine as this is what we've done with your millions of pounds of funding. But I think as a way of getting the message out there of what millions of pounds of funding might get us, it is the most powerful way. But yeah,
I think we could incorporate that art side of it as part of the awareness, though.
Exactly. That's what I think. That's like the dissemination part rather than the results as such. But yeah, I think we just have to ignore the naysayers though and be like, do you know what, this is a powerful thing to do and we're going to do it regardless of what you say. But yeah, it needs to be alongside some of the stuff that maybe sits a bit more comfortably with those groups of people. But yeah, no, we're not going to drop that idea. It just needs a little bit more time, I think.
So where can people find more and connect with you and be part of PERIScope?
I think the Padlet board that I mentioned, I've been on maternity leave, so that hasn't been as active as it should have been, but we will ramp that up a little bit with updates soon. And yeah, my hashtag on Twitter is @DrColeFletch. We can circulate that. Just drop me a message on there. It's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm a prolific tweeter, so always putting stuff about the project on there anyway, if people are interested. And Lauren, I don't know what the best ways to get in touch with you would be. Would it be through the network?
Yeah, through the network, as previously mentioned on our last chat. And I can put you in touch with Rachel, or I can answer questions.
Yeah, and we'll have all those links when we put them into the notes. Great. Which is fantastic. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been amazing, as always. And as it progresses and develops, please keep us up to date, and we can bring you back and have another chat, which would be great.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
That was amazing.
That's a wrap on another episode of the NICU Live Network. Thanks for joining us today. To stay connected, please make sure you're following us on social media.
And if you found value in this episode, please share, like, or comment.
We'll see you on the next episode.